Lisa Raitt is co-chair of the Coalition for a Better Future. She's also former MP for Milton and former deputy leader of the Conservative Party. Lisa, thanks for joining me.
Great pleasure, Wyatt. Thank you for asking me.
Let's just start out with the federal budget today. Do you think it meets the mark given some of the challenges that Canada is currently facing?
Yeah, so as the co-chair of the Coalition for a Better Future, we have a scorecard. And in that scorecard, we take a look at what we think are the things that we need to be doing in this country in order to ensure that we have long-term prosperity for our generation and future generations. And we have about 144 members, and we're all of the same agreement that we want to have long-term growth that is both inclusive and sustainable. So what I can say about today is I do see some really good stuff in there. If you think about what we need for long-term growth, obviously we need to make sure that we convert to electricity. There's a big portion of the budget talking about clean electricity. We know that we want to be part of this big energy supply chain that's being created by the United States, bringing home lots of work that used to happen in other countries and supplying subsidies and incentives to American companies to do it. There's a big piece of the budget dealing with that today. And we want it to be something that's inclusive so that long-term growth is something that isn't just the old way of doing things, that everybody benefits. And you can see sprinkled throughout this budget some good pieces that talk about the importance for a living wage, that any kind of economic growth is going to be good for everybody. So I'm going to give it good. But as always, there's more to go. There's more to go. But I give my hat is off to Chrystia Freeland. I think she's done a good job on this.
And I mean, you mentioned incentives, and obviously President Biden was recently in Canada. Obviously, Canada is a country that's always looking for, more business, more economic potential. Do you think that this budget meets the mark in terms of, providing various businesses, whether that be small, large, etc., the incentive to, run their business or at least, partially operate, do business, etc., in Canada?
I do. I think there are three important pieces to this. Number one, look, when the Americans are offering you a whole bunch of money to bring your company down to the United States, it's really hard to resist because that money is very helpful to make sure that your company takes off. But a lot of companies just want to stay in Canada. So we don't necessarily have to match exactly what the Biden administration is doing because we can't, because they have so much more money than us. So it's important for us to at least have something financially. The second part, though, is once we know that the company is going to stay and they're going to pursue a project, that if there's any stuff that has to be approved by the federal government, a regulatory process or a permit that's needed, that they get that permit as quickly as possible. We don't have a good reputation in this country in getting projects built in a timely fashion. This budget does mention that they're concerned about it, so they need to do that. The third part is Indigenous reconciliation. In Canada, we have made a commitment to Indigenous economic reconciliation. There is some material in the budget that talks about it. It's going to support businesses as they try to build out these kinds of projects, recognizing that it is part of our fabric. I think we're going to be ahead of the game than the United States, quite frankly. We can't match them financially, but what we can do in terms of ensuring that our communities are welcoming to projects are far and away much better off than they are in the US.
And I guess when you look towards what this federal budget does, for example, a lot of people are looking at this federal budget as, similar to the last federal budget in the way of, given the times that Canada's in, given the affordability challenges, the cost of living challenges, it really is a time where we need to focus on, getting Canada out of this tough kind of economic phase. Do you think that the budget has done that, and to what extent, given the fact that the projected deficit of 40.1 billion is larger than what had been expected?
Yeah, there are people hurting because of the raise of inflation. Now, the Conservative Party is going to tell you that the reason why that we have inflation is because the Trudeau government spent too much money, and they're going to argue about that. And I understand that's a valid point to raise. But the reality is that when people are hurting, you really have to look after them. And that was part of the reason why you're going to see this, what they're calling the grocery rebate, which is just really more of your GST rebate going into people's bank accounts so that they can keep up with a little bit of the price increases. I think though, Wyatt, one thing that I point out, and I don't think anybody else is talking about this yet. So you may get the scoop on it, but one of the statistics in the budget that really caught my attention that should be of interest to folks of my kids' generation and your generation is that by the time we get to 2017, the amount of money that we're spending on the elderly, which will be me one day, is going to increase by 58%. It's going to go from 60 billion to over 93 billion dollars a year. That's tax dollars, straight up. That's a huge jump. That far exceeds any revenue jumps that we're going to see. So the country is heading towards a wall when it comes to the aging Gen X's and the aging baby boomers and the cost associated with it. So to make investments today in an economy that needs to keep up with the United States and grow for future generations, super important. So I think it's always good to keep in the back of one's mind that things are not going to get cheaper. Things are not going to get cheaper. We have an aging population. Healthcare is going to be more expensive, and we need to have that long-term economic growth plan that's going to allow us to pay for it as it comes up. Because right now, it's not looking really good.